Peter's story, Peter's life with Jesus, does not begin on the side of the Sea of Galilee, on the side of the Lake of Gennesaret. In Luke's gospel, it actually begun earlier, some weeks or perhaps even months earlier. You see, Peter's mother-in-law had been sick, struck with that sort of fever that casts the sufferer into a shivering, burning up middle distance in which they cannot be reached, the sort of fever, the sort of sickness that makes loved ones wonder in their hearts, what if? What if she's not going to get better? That sort of pit of your stomach fear that will send you out to try to find someone, anybody, who can do something for them. It was that sort of fear that drove Peter to go and find Jesus, a man he had never met, but a man who was reputed to be able to work wonders, a man who was, it was said, in their own fishing town of Capernaum that very day. Jesus was in the synagogue teaching, and Peter went to find him and asked him if he could just come with him, to just come with him to his home, to see his mother-in-law, to see if he could do anything for her. Jesus agreed and walked to Peter's house and stood over Peter's mother-in-law in her sickbed, and with just words, she was well again. She popped up from her sickbed and was immediately, "Oh, I'm sorry, I hadn't been expecting guests. The house hasn't been made up. Let me make you something to eat. Please sit down. I insist. She was not only well, it was as if even the body's memory of pain was gone too. Everyone who was there who saw it, every single one, they ran out of Peter's house and they went to go find their own loved ones, their own family, their own friends who were sick or hurt or ill or haunted. They went and found everyone who needed help and brought them to Jesus, hoping that he could help them too. All evening long, Peter watched Jesus cure every single person who was brought before him, no matter how serious the malady. Every single sick person in the entire city of Capernaum was healed that very night, so that they walked out of Peter's home well again, so that the home would have been filled with shouts of joy from sunset until sunrise when he finished. So what does Peter do in the morning after this incredible sight all evening long? Does he fall to his knees? Does he confess his sins? Does he pledge his life to Jesus, leave it all behind, follow him? No. No, in the morning, Peter went back to work, fishing. Jesus went this way and Peter went that way. Peter went back to fishing and Jesus left town. He went and traveled through other towns and cities all throughout the Galilee, teaching, healing. Peter, fishing. It was only by happenstance. It was only by happenstance that the story that Vard read for us even happened. It is only by happenstance that Jesus encountered Peter again. You see, Jesus was teaching on the shore of a lake, Lake Gennesaret, sometimes called the Sea of Galilee. And the shoreline was a very busy place, full of all sorts of commerce. And the crowd that was gathered to hear Jesus, it was huge. And they were pressing in around him on all sides. Everybody jostling to be able to see and hear, but in that way where nobody can see or hear. And Jesus, after a while, realized that this just wasn't working. He couldn't teach like this. He needed some distance from the crowd in order for them to be able to really listen to what he had to say. And so he looked around, looking for some kind of way that he'd be able to get some distance from these people, and just down the shore, he sees a boat. A small boat, and inside of that small boat, a fisherman, hard at work at some of the day-to-day tasks of being a fisherman. It was Peter, who was not there to listen to Jesus. It was Peter there fishing. So Jesus went up to this man and asked him, "Could you take me just a little ways out? Just a little ways out onto the lake?" Now, whether Jesus remembered Peter, Peter certainly remembered him. This man very well might have saved his mother-in-law's life. So if out on the water he wants to go, out they would go. And Jesus taught, and the crowd listened, and Peter minded the oars, keeping the boat from drifting too far out onto the lake or bottoming out on the shore. And at the end of it all, after Jesus had finished what he had to say and the crowd had their fill of words, Jesus then turned to Peter and had something to say, just to him. Perhaps it was by way of thanking Peter for his help, or maybe it was out of concern that this man not have nothing to show for a day of work, or perhaps for reasons of his own. Jesus says to Peter, "Put out into the deep water and cast your nets there." Now, fishing had not been good, but Peter was not about to tell this man no, so he did it. They went out into the deep water, and he cast his nets into the sea, and he hauled on the nets and found them so teeming, so filled with an uncountable mass of fish, fins and scales and gills and eyes, smelling of the sea even more than the boat could hold. And Jesus there beside him. Peter fell to his knees, confessed his sins, clutched at Jesus' feet, and the next steps, the very next steps that Peter would take, would be to leave everything behind and follow Jesus. His life from that day on dedicated to God. All that over fish. Over fish. It was a remarkable catch of fish, that's true, but it was nothing other than a net filled with fish, something which Peter had seen 100 times. Peter had watched Jesus cure the sick with just a word, and then went back to his ordinary life. Peter had seen Jesus cure every single sick person in the entire city of Capernaum in just one night. But it is fish that makes him drop to his knees, fish that makes him confess his sins, fish that makes him pledge his life, fish that makes him leave it all behind, fish that makes him a follower of Jesus, fish. I get it. I do. I understand why it meant so much to him. Jesus had cured the sick, and Peter saw a holy man filled with the power of heaven. Amazing, that's true. But it had nothing to do with Peter. Demanded nothing of him, required nothing of Peter. This man, Jesus, was filled with the Holy Spirit. That's obvious. And Peter was not. That was obvious too. And so he went back to his ordinary life, having seen someone else do extraordinary things. Awestruck, yes. Humbled, certainly. Grateful, yes. But transformed? No. Not transformed. It is one thing. It is one thing to watch Jesus do incredible things. One thing to see the power of God moving abroad in the world and to be amazed. It is one thing to see something inexplicable. It is quite another for Jesus to say, Peter, come here. You are going to help me. I need your boat. I need your nets. I need your oars. I need your arms. I need your life. I have holy work to do, and you are going to help me put out into the deep waters. I get it. I do. The great work of heaven touches Peter's ordinary life, sweeps up and implicates the ordinary things of Peter's world. Fish. Of course he is transformed. Who could stay the same? It is easy to imagine that God reaching into a person's life would be dramatic, wondrous, miraculous, angel visions that are totally divorced from the experiences of the world that we mere mortals have. But that is not the way God works most of the time. And miracles are overrated anyway. Peter watched miracle healings for 8 hours straight. It took fish to make a disciple of him. Because fishing is what Peter knew. Fishing is what Peter could give. God calls people to be who they are, not someone else. God calls people to have lived the lives that they have, not to have been better or different. If you are waiting, if you are hoping, if you are listening for God's call upon your own life, if you are wondering when you will hear it, how it shall come, what it will be like, that is between you and the Spirit of God. But learn this from the Apostle Peter. God will call in the midst of the ordinary stuff of life, the holy work of what is normal, the daily bread of existence. The call of God will look like something you've seen before 100 times. A net filled with fish. A person with their hand out on the street. A law crying out to be changed. A child crying out for comfort. A world crying out for justice. Something you have seen 100 times. The Spirit of God, still living, still moving into the world. God reaches into the ordinary stuff of life, the ordinary places of our world. You are going to help me. I need your commute, your parenting, your lousy desk job. I need your mind, your teaching, your 3-day-old sobriety. I need your med school training, your accounting certificate, your Saturday morning walks in the woods. I need your heartache, your divorce, your diagnosis. I need your coming out story, your love, your anger. I need your prayers full of heartbreak. I need your hands full of healing. I need your life full of living. I need your dying full of loving. What does any of that have to do with God? What do fish? The call of God. There is holy work to do, and you are going to help. Out in the deep waters.